The coat landed on my shoulders without warning, heavy as a verdict. I hadn't heard him approach. One moment I was standing alone by the champagne fountain, hyper-aware of every stair burning through the silk of my dress, and the next, the world went dark. Not dark exactly, muffled. The weight of expensive wool and the scent of cedar, tobacco, and something sharper, more dangerous, surrounded me like a claim. Don't move. The voice came from behind me, low and absolute. Not a request. A command that made my spine lock in place even as every instinct screamed at me to run. I could feel him there, close enough that the heat of his body pressed against the coat now draped over me like a shroud. Close enough that I knew he was tall, broad, immovable. Around us, the ballroom seemed to inhale. Conversations didn't stop exactly, but they changed pitch, dropping to whispers that felt like warnings. I tried to turn my head to see who had just claimed me in front of Manhattan's elite, but his hand, large, tattooed with symbols I didn't recognize, appeared at my shoulder, holding the coat in place. I said, "Don't move." Each word was carved from stone. That dress was a mistake. My mistake? I wanted to ask. I wanted to tell him that I didn't choose it, that it had arrived at my apartment 3 days ago in a black box with no card, only a cream-colored invitation to tonight's gala. I wanted to explain that I was nobody, that I didn't belong here, that surely he had me confused with someone else. Before continuing the story, please consider giving this video a like, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps bring more stories to you. But when I finally gathered the courage to look up, the words died in my throat. His face was partially obscured by shadows and the sharp angle of his jaw, but what I could see stopped my heart. Dark eyes that weren't looking at me, they were consuming me. A mouth set in a hard line that suggested smiling was something he'd forgotten how to do. And a surgical mask of ornate black lace that made him look like a beautiful nightmare, the kind that waits at the edge of your bed until you stop pretending to sleep. "Do you know what red means in my world?" he asked, his voice dropping even lower, intimate in a way that felt like a threat and a promise tangled together. I shook my head, not trusting my voice. "It means Monaldo." The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. "It means claimed. It means mine." His hand moved from my shoulder to the collar of the coat, pulling it tighter around me, cocooning me in darkness. "And since you walked into my city wearing my color, La Mia Piccola Virgin, you're not leaving it unclaimed." Every instinct told me to push away, to scream, to demand he let me go. But the look in his eyes, possessive, territorial, but somehow desperate underneath all that control, made me pause. This wasn't a game to him. This was something primal. And behind him, I could see them. Other men in expensive suits with dead eyes and hungry smiles, watching me the way wolves watch a lamb that's wandered from the flock. "What do you want from me?" I whispered, hating how small my voice sounded. His thumb brushed the side of my neck, just above where the coat met my skin, and I felt the touch like an electric brand. "Everything," Leonardo Monaldo said simply. "Starting with making sure no one else ever sees you in that dress again." The coat tightened. The room spun. And somewhere between the champagne fountain and the exit, I realized I'd just become the possession of the most dangerous man in New York. All because I wore red to a gala. The limousine was waiting exactly where his hand guided me, through a side exit I hadn't known existed, past security who melted away at the mere sight of him, and into the cool Manhattan night that smelled of rain and expensive perfume from the gala we were leaving behind. "Get in." I stood frozen on the curb, his coat still heavy on my shoulders, watching as a driver in black gloves held open the door to a vehicle that looked more like a hearse than transportation. The interior glowed with soft amber light, all leather and dark wood, private and tomb-like. "I don't even know you," I managed, my voice barely audible over the distant traffic. Leonardo's hand found the small of my back, and even through the layers of coat and dress, I felt the heat of it, the possession. "You knew me the moment you put on that dress. You just didn't know my name yet." He applied the slightest pressure, and somehow my feet moved, carrying me into the limousine like I was a puppet, and he held all the strings. The door closed with a decisive click. The world outside became a blur of lights through tinted windows so dark they might as well have been painted black. I pressed myself against the far door, clutching his coat around me, suddenly aware that I was alone with a man whose reputation arrived in whispers and whose business was conducted in blood. He didn't sit across from me. He sat beside me, close enough that our thighs almost touched, and pulled a crystal decanter from a hidden panel. The amber liquid that poured into 2 glasses caught the light like liquid gold. "Drink," he said, pressing one into my trembling hand. "I don't want." It wasn't a request, Tesoro. His eyes held mine, and I saw something flicker there beneath the command. Concern, maybe? Or calculation? "You're shaking. The whiskey will help." I took a small sip and immediately regretted it as fire burned down my throat. He smiled, the first real expression I'd seen crack that marble facade, and it made him somehow more dangerous and more human all at once. "Now," he said, settling back against the leather like a king on a throne, "tell me who gave you the dress." "I don't know." The words tumbled out. "It just arrived at my apartment 3 days ago. Black box, no card, just the invitation to the gala and the dress inside." I felt stupid even saying it. I thought maybe it was from the charity. That they wanted volunteers to look nice or something. His jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath skin that looked like it had been carved from bronze. "You thought a $20,000 Valentino was a volunteer uniform?" 20,000. The number hit me like a slap. I looked down at the red silk peeking out from beneath his black coat, suddenly understanding why every eye in that ballroom had been glued to me. I wasn't wearing a dress. I was wearing a down payment on a house. "I didn't know," I whispered. "I would never have worn it if I'd known. That's exactly why they chose you." Leonardo took the glass from my hand before I could drop it, setting both drinks aside. Then he did something unexpected. He pulled a phone from his jacket, tapped the screen, and showed me a photograph. It was me, standing outside my apartment building 4 days ago, wearing my waitress uniform from the diner, hair in a messy ponytail, looking tired and completely ordinary. Someone had been watching me. Someone had known me. "My enemies have been searching for a weakness for years," he said quietly, his accent thickening with what might have been anger or fear, I couldn't tell which. "I don't keep mistresses. I don't have a wife, no children, no lovers they can threaten." So they got creative. His finger traced the edge of the phone screen, not quite touching my photographed face. "They found the most innocent thing they could, a virgin who works double shifts and sends money to her sick mother in Boston. A girl who wouldn't know a Mafia don from a businessman. A perfect lamb to dress in Monaldo red and send into the lion's den." My blood ran cold. "Your enemies sent me to the gala?" As bait. He pocketed the phone and turned to face me fully, and the intensity in his gaze made me feel like I was being x-rayed, seen down to my bones. "If I ignored you, they would know red means nothing to me, that I'm weak, that my family's symbols are meaningless. Every rival in the city would start wearing our colors, disrespecting our legacy. But if I claimed you," his hand reached out, thumb brushing my cheekbone with surprising gentleness, "then they have a weapon against me. The monster who never cared about anything suddenly has something to lose. So let me go," I said desperately, hating the way my skin warmed under his touch. "Just drop me off at my apartment and forget you ever saw me. I won't tell anyone. I'll burn the dress." "Oh, you think they'll let you walk away now?" His laugh was bitter, dark. "Every camera in that ballroom caught the moment I put my coat on you. By morning, your face will be in every family's briefing file. You're not anonymous anymore, Piccola. You're Leonardo Monaldo's weakness. And weaknesses don't get to go home and pretend nothing happened. They get eliminated." The limousine turned onto a bridge, and through the tinted windows I watched Manhattan's glittering skyline begin to shrink behind us. We were leaving the city. My phone was in my clutch, but something told me calling 911 wouldn't save me from this. "Where are you taking me?" Leonardo's hand moved from my face to the coat, still wrapped around my shoulders, adjusting it like he was tucking in a child. "Somewhere they can't touch you. Somewhere I can keep you safe while I deal with the bastards who thought they could use you against me." "I didn't ask to be kept safe by you." "No," he agreed, and something almost like regret flickered across his features. "But you wore my color, mia cara. And in my world, that means you're mine to protect. Whether you want to be or not." The fortress appeared through the early morning mist like something out of a Gothic novel, all stone and iron, perched on a cliff overlooking the Hudson with the kind of views that belonged in magazines I couldn't afford to buy. As we passed through gates that closed behind us with the finality of a jail cell, I realized that beautiful prisons were still prisons. "Welcome home," Leonardo said, and the irony in his voice suggested he knew exactly how the word would taste in my mouth. Bitter. Wrong. A woman in her 50s with silver hair pulled into an immaculate bun met us in the circular driveway. She looked me up and down with the critical eye of someone assessing livestock, taking in Leonardo's coat, still draped over my shoulders, the red dress peeking out beneath it, my cheap heels that had already rubbed blisters into my feet. "This is Rosa," Leonardo said, helping me from the car with a hand at my elbow that felt more like a shackle than courtesy. "She'll show you to your room and get you settled. Anything you need, you ask her." "What I need is to go home," I said, pulling away from his touch even though my legs felt unsteady on the cobblestones. His expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in those dark eyes. "Your apartment was firebombed an hour ago. 14 minutes after we left the Gala, to be precise. So unless you'd like to go home to a pile of ash and police tape, I suggest you let Rosa show you where you'll be sleeping." The world tilted. My apartment. My books. The photo of my mother on the nightstand. The normalcy I'd been clinging to even as this nightmare unfolded. Gone. "My neighbor," I whispered. "Mrs. Chin, she's 83. She was at her daughter's house in Queens. I had her collected before the device was triggered." He said it so matter-of-factly, like moving elderly women around the city was something he did every Tuesday. "No casualties except your security deposit." Rosa's hand touched my shoulder, surprisingly gentle. "Come, child. You look ready to collapse." I let her lead me inside because the alternative was collapsing right there in the driveway, and I wouldn't give Leonardo Monaldo the satisfaction of catching me when I fell. The room they put me in was larger than my entire apartment had been. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked manicured gardens that probably required a staff of 20. The bed was a four-poster monstrosity draped in silk that looked like it cost more than my annual salary. And everywhere, the bars on the windows disguised as decorative ironwork, the door that locked from the outside, the camera hidden in the crown molding that I spotted only because the morning sun hit it at just the right angle. A gilded cage, exactly as promised. Rosa left me with a promise of breakfast and clothes that would actually fit, and the moment the door clicked shut, I was at the window. 3 stories up. Guards, though they'd probably call them groundskeepers, stationed at intervals around the property. The gate we'd entered through was easily a quarter-mile away, and even if I could reach it, the biometric scanner I'd seen would never recognize my fingerprints. The door. I tried it anyway, knowing it was futile. Locked, as expected. So I did what any rational person would do when kidnapped by the Mafia. I opened the window, at least those still worked, squeezed through the decorative bars that were just wide enough for my frame, and climbed down the trellis covered in roses that tore at my skin and the red dress with equal enthusiasm. I made it halfway across the lawn before the first guard spotted me. He didn't shout or chase. He simply spoke into his wrist, and within seconds, 3 more appeared from various positions, forming a loose perimeter around me. Not threatening. Not approaching. Just there. "Miss Moore." The closest one had kind eyes and an apologetic smile. "Please go back inside." "I'm leaving," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. "You can't keep me here against my will." "That's kidnapping." "I'll call the police. You should come see this first." A different voice, female, from the tree line to my left. She stepped out of the shadows, dressed in the same dark clothing as the others, but with something in her hand. A tablet. She approached slowly, like I was a wild animal that might bolt, and turned the screen toward me. The footage was time-stamped from 26 minutes ago. It showed a black SUV parked across the street from the estate's front gate. 3 men inside, and even through the grainy security camera image, I could see the rifle being assembled in the back seat. The telephoto lens being attached. The barrel angled toward the house. Toward the windows of the room I'd just escaped from. "They've been there since we brought you in," the woman said quietly. "Waiting to see which room you'd be in. Waiting for a clear shot." She lowered the tablet. "We're not here to keep you in, Miss Moore. We're here to keep them out." My knees gave out. The grass was wet with dew, soaking through what was left of the red dress, but I couldn't seem to make my legs work. Someone wanted to kill me. Someone was sitting outside with a rifle, waiting for the chance to put a bullet through a window and into my skull, all because I'd worn the wrong dress to the wrong party. Hands lifted me, gentle but firm, and I was too numb to fight as they carried me back toward the fortress. Back toward the cage. But as we passed through the ornate front doors, I caught sight of Leonardo standing in the shadows of the foyer, watching with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Did you let me try to escape?" I asked, my voice hollow. "Just to prove your point?" He moved closer, and in the morning light streaming through the windows, I could see he hadn't slept. His jacket was gone, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms marked with scars and ink. He looked less like a businessman and more like what he really was, a soldier who'd fought his way to the top of a war that never ended. "I let you learn," he corrected, reaching out to pluck a rose thorn from my hair. A drop of my blood stained his fingertip. The difference between a prison and a sanctuary is sometimes just a matter of which side of the bars the monsters are on. Rosa appeared with a first aid kit and a disappointed cluck of her tongue. "Your beautiful dress, Bambina." "Ruined." I looked down at the shredded silk, the Monaldo red now decorated with grass stains and tears, and the reality of what my life had become in the span of a single night. "Good," I said, meeting Leonardo's eyes with something that felt dangerously close to defiance. "I hated it anyway." His smile was slow and approving, like I'd just passed a test I hadn't known I was taking. "Then tomorrow, we'll burn it together. But tonight you rest. And you let my people keep you alive. And if I refuse? Then I'll have Rosa tie you to the bed," he said easily, already turning away. "And neither of us wants to waste her excellent cooking skills on feeding you like a child." I was too tired to argue. Too scared to keep fighting. So I let Rosa lead me back upstairs, past the cameras and the locked doors and the windows with their beautiful, imprisoning bars, and tried not to think about the rifle still pointed at my cage. Or the man who'd made himself my keeper, whether I wanted one or not. The stylist arrived at 10 in the morning with an entourage that included 3 assistants, a tailor, and enough garment bags to outfit a small country. They transformed my gilded cage into a boutique, hanging silks and cashmeres and wools in every color except the one that had started this nightmare. No red. Not a single piece. Mr. Monaldo was very specific about his preferences, the stylist said, a reed-thin man named Marcus who spoke about fashion the way priests spoke about God. He held up a dove-gray cashmere dress with a neckline that would barely show my collarbones. Elegant. Refined. Nothing that invites the wrong kind of attention. I stood on the fitting platform in my borrowed nightgown, watching them arrange my new life on hangers, and felt something dangerous building in my chest. Anger, maybe. Or the first stirrings of rebellion. What if I prefer the wrong kind of attention? I asked. Marcus's smile was patient, practiced. Then you'd be dead by Thursday, darling. Mr. Monaldo is trying to keep you alive, not turn you into a fashion statement. They measured me with the efficiency of people who'd done this before. Inseam, bust, waist, hips, every number called out and recorded like I was being cataloged for inventory. Which I supposed I was. Another possession in Leonardo Monaldo's collection, needing the proper packaging. The door opened without warning, and he filled the frame like he'd been built specifically to command doorways. He'd showered since I'd seen him last, changed into a fresh suit that probably cost more than my mother's monthly medical bills, but there were still shadows under his eyes that spoke of a sleepless night spent doing things I probably didn't want to know about. His gaze swept over the room, taking in the organized chaos, before landing on me in my nightgown on the platform. Something flickered in his expression, possession, yes, but also something almost like concern. "How is she doing?" he asked Marcus, but his eyes never left mine. "Difficult measurements," Marcus replied diplomatically. "She keeps flinching." "I keep being touched by strangers," I corrected, wrapping my arms around myself. "There's a difference." Leonardo moved closer, and the assistants seemed to melt away, giving him space like he was radioactive. He stopped at the edge of the platform, eye level with me now, close enough that I could smell his cologne and see the precise way his beard had been trimmed that morning. "Show me what you've selected," he said to Marcus, but his hand reached out to steady me as I wobbled slightly on the platform. The touch was brief, impersonal, but I felt it like a brand anyway. They paraded the options before him like he was a king reviewing troops. He rejected a cream-colored blouse for being too sheer, vetoed a navy dress for having a slit that climbed too high on the thigh, approved grays and blacks and deep forest greens, building a wardrobe that would make me invisible in any crowd. "Nothing bright," he instructed. "Nothing that draws the eye. She blends in now. She disappears." "I'm standing right here," I said quietly. "You could ask me what I like." His attention shifted back to me, and for a moment, the room felt too small for both of us and all that unspoken tension. "What you like almost got you killed, Tesoro. What I choose will keep you breathing. So I'm supposed to just be your doll? Wear what you pick, go where you say, become whatever version of me keeps your enemies from using me as target practice." Yes. No hesitation. No apology. Just brutal honesty delivered with those dark eyes that saw too much. "Until I've eliminated the threat, that's exactly what you are. My responsibility. My problem to solve." He turned back to Marcus. "We'll take everything you've selected. Have it delivered by tonight." After they left, the room felt too quiet. I stood among the garment bags, surrounded by clothes chosen to erase me, and felt something inside me solidify into resolve. If Leonardo Monaldo wanted to control every aspect of my life, fine. But he couldn't control everything. I found the red dress where Rosa had hung it to dry after my escape attempt. It was ruined, torn at the hem, stained with grass and blood, no longer the pristine $20,000 statement piece that had started this nightmare. But it was mine, the only thing in this entire fortress that belonged to me and my choices, even if those choices had been manipulated. The closet was enormous, all custom shelving and automatic lighting. I pushed past the new clothes still in their garment bags, past the shoes that had been selected to match each outfit, until I found the back corner where the wall met the floor. There was a loose board there. I discovered it that morning while searching for escape routes, and behind it, a space just large enough. I folded the red dress carefully, reverently, and tucked it into the darkness. My secret. My spark. The reminder that I'd walked into a gala once as myself, before Leonardo Monaldo had decided to remake me into something safer. "What are you doing back there?" I spun around so fast I nearly fell. Leonardo stood in the closet doorway, watching me with that unsettling intensity that made me feel transparent. "Nothing," I said quickly, stepping away from my hiding spot. "Just organizing." He moved closer, and I held my breath, certain he'd discovered my small rebellion. But he simply reached past me to straighten a garment bag, his arm brushing my shoulder, his body blocking my escape route without seeming to try. "The clothes will help you blend in," he said quietly, "but they won't change who you are underneath. I'm not trying to erase you, Tamara. I'm trying to keep you alive long enough to figure out who you actually are when you're not being used as a pawn in someone else's game." He left before I could respond, and I stood there in my new wardrobe, surrounded by colors chosen to make me invisible, with a ruined red dress hidden in the walls like contraband. Like hope. Like the part of me that refused to disappear, no matter how many modest necklines and neutral tones Leonardo Monaldo wrapped me in. That night, I wore the dove gray cashmere to dinner. I blended. I disappeared. But in the back corner of my closet, the red dress waited like a promise I'd made to myself. A reminder that cages were only permanent if you forgot how to fight. And I was just beginning to remember. Would you let someone erase your identity to save your life? Or would you risk everything to stay true to yourself? Drop your thoughts below, I need to know what you'd choose. I woke to the sound of voices in my room. Not voices exactly, murmurs, the careful choreography of people trying to be quiet while invading every corner of my temporary prison. I sat up in the massive bed, clutching the silk sheets to my chest, and stared at the scene unfolding before me. 3 women, all dressed in severe black with measuring tapes draped around their necks like stoles, were systematically emptying enormous garment bags onto every available surface. Dresses, blouses, trousers, coats, a tsunami of fabric in muted tones. Cream, ivory, black, navy. Nothing bright. Nothing that could be mistaken for a heartbeat. "What is this?" I demanded, my voice still rough with sleep. The oldest of the women, silver-haired with sharp cheekbones that could cut glass, turned to me with the expression of someone who had seen everything and been impressed by none of it. "Senior Monaldo has requested a complete wardrobe revision," she said in accented English, her tone making it clear that what Leonardo requested was law. "We are here to fit you properly." "I have clothes," I protested weakly. "You had clothes," she corrected. "They have been removed." Panic flared in my chest. I threw back the covers and rushed to the walk-in closet I'd discovered last night. It was empty. Completely barren except for a white silk robe hanging on a single hook like a flag of surrender. "Where is my dress?" I spun around, my heart hammering. "The red one." The woman's expression didn't change. Senior Monaldo was very specific. All previous garments were to be disposed of. "No." The word came out strangled. That dress was the only thing I had left from before. Before the gala, before Leonardo, before my life became something unrecognizable. It was evidence. It was proof that I had existed independently. I pushed past the women, ignoring their protests, and tore through the room. I checked under the bed, behind the velvet curtains, in the ornate drawers of the vanity. Nothing. He had erased me. The door opened without a knock. Leonardo filled the frame, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my father's car, looking like he'd already conquered half the world before breakfast. "You're awake," he observed, his gaze traveling over me in the thin nightgown I'd found in the bathroom. "Good. We have a schedule." "Where is my dress?" I demanded, my hands clenched into fists. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him with a soft click that felt like a lock engaging. "Destroyed. As it should have been the moment you received it. You had no right, I had every right." His voice was calm, which made it worse. "That dress was a weapon used against both of us. Keeping it would be like keeping a loaded gun under your pillow and calling it a keepsake." "It was mine," I said, hating the tremor in my voice. "The only thing that was mine." Something flickered in his dark eyes. Not quite sympathy, but close enough to surprise me. He gestured to the sea of expensive fabric covering every surface. "Everything here is yours. Modest, elegant, and most importantly, safe. You will not be mistaken for bait again." The seamstresses were watching our exchange with the carefully blank expressions of people who knew when to become invisible. Leonardo nodded to them. "Begin. I want her wardrobe complete by tonight." The next 2 hours were a special kind of torture. I was measured, pinned, draped, and adjusted like a doll. The clothes were beautiful, I couldn't deny that. Cashmere sweaters soft as clouds, silk blouses that whispered against my skin, tailored trousers that made me look like I belonged in boardrooms. But everything was designed to conceal. High necklines, long sleeves, modest hemlines. I was being transformed from a woman into a shadow. When the seamstresses finally left, promising to have everything tailored and delivered by evening, I stood in front of the floor-length mirror in a cream wool dress that covered me from collarbone to knee. I looked like a saint. Untouchable. Sexless. I looked like his. That's when I saw it. A flash of crimson in the corner of my eye. I turned, my breath catching. There, stuffed behind the velvet curtains near the window, was a scrap of red fabric. The seamstresses must have missed it when they cleared the room. My heart leapt. I waited until I heard Leonardo's footsteps retreat down the hallway, then I rushed to the window. It wasn't the entire dress, just a section of the skirt, torn at the seam, but it was enough. The silk was still vibrant, still alive with color that refused to be muted. I folded it carefully, my hands trembling, and looked around for a hiding place. The room was too pristine, too carefully curated. Anywhere I put it, he would find it. Unless. I walked to the enormous bed and found the seam in the mattress, where the fabric covering met the box spring. Using a pen from the desk, I worked a small hole larger, just big enough to slide the folded silk inside. I pushed it deep, then smoothed the fabric back into place. When I stepped back, there was no evidence of tampering. But I knew it was there. My small rebellion. My spark, hidden in the heart of his carefully constructed cage. That night, I stood in front of the mirror wearing a black silk blouse and tailored pants, my hair pulled back in a neat chignon. I looked like I belonged to the Monaldo empire. Polished. Controlled. His. But beneath the mattress where I would lay my head each night, red silk whispered in the darkness. Some things, I realized, could not be erased. Not by money, not by power, not even by men who thought possession was the same as ownership. I might wear his colors now, but I would keep my own. Reflection question: if you were Tamara, would you have hidden the dress or let it go? What would you hold on to? Subscribe to see what Leonardo discovers next. The business meeting was held in a restaurant that didn't exist. Or rather, it existed, but not for people like me. There was no sign outside, no hostess stand, just a black door and a brick wall in Tribeca that opened when Leonardo's driver knocked twice. We descended stairs into a private dining room that smelled of expensive wine and older money, where 4 men sat around a table laden with untouched food. They looked up when we entered, and I watched their expressions shift from surprise to calculation in the span of a heartbeat. "You brought a woman to negotiation?" The man at the head of the table was older, with silver threading through black hair and eyes like flint. "This is new, Monaldo." "Minetti." Leonardo's hand settled on my lower back, a gesture that looked protective but felt possessive. "This is Tamara Moore. She's under my protection." The word protection hung in the air like a sword. Every man at that table understood what it meant. "Touch her and die." "Sit," Leonardo murmured to me, pulling out a chair. I sat because standing felt like a spotlight I didn't want. The meeting began with talk I didn't understand. Territory disputes, percentage points, shipments that were mentioned in vague terms that made me think they weren't discussing anything legal. I stayed silent, my hands folded in my lap, trying to disappear into the high-backed chair. But I watched. I saw the tension coiling tighter with each passing minute, the way hands moved closer to jacket pockets where I suspected guns rested. I saw Leonardo's jaw tighten, his fingers drumming once on the table, a tell I was beginning to recognize as restrained violence. "The docks are mine," Leonardo said, his voice dropping to a register that made the air feel thinner. "They've been mine for 5 years. This isn't a negotiation." "Then why are we here?" Minetti leaned back, a cruel smile playing at his lips. "You want war, Monaldo? My family has been in this city longer than yours. We remember when your father was still, don't." The single word from Leonardo was a blade. "Finish that sentence and I'll finish this conversation with blood on this table." The temperature in the room plummeted. I watched Minetti's men shift, watched hands move to weapons. This was going to explode. People were going to die, and I was sitting in the middle of it wearing a cream blouse and pearls like I'd stumbled into someone else's nightmare. "Excuse me." My voice came out smaller than I intended, but it cut through the testosterone like a bell. Every head turned toward me. Leonardo's hand shot out, gripping my wrist under the table. A warning. I ignored it. "Mr. Minetti," I said, forcing myself to look at him directly even though my heart was trying to escape through my throat. "You said your family has been here longer. That means you've built something. Legacy. Reputation." I swallowed. "Is one dock worth destroying that? Worth your sons growing up without fathers? Because that's what this becomes, doesn't it? If you fight, people die. And then their families fight. And it never ends." The silence that followed was deafening. "She speaks," Minetti said slowly, his eyes narrowing. "Tell me, little girl, what do you know about our world?" "Nothing," I admitted. "But I know about loss. My mother died when I was 12. Cancer, not bullets. But grief is grief. And I know that every man at this table is someone's son. Someone's father, maybe. The docks are just docks. Wood and water. But the people you'd lose fighting over them? They're irreplaceable." I felt Leonardo's grip on my wrist tighten, though whether in anger or something else, I couldn't tell. Minetti stared at me for a long moment. Then, impossibly, he laughed. A real laugh, not cruel, almost charmed. "Monaldo, where did you find this one?" "A convent." "Close enough," Leonardo muttered. Minetti leaned forward, his expression shifting into something almost paternal. "You make a compelling argument, Miss Moore. But business is business." "Then make it business," I said, gaining courage from not being shot yet. "A compromise. Not surrender. Mr. Monaldo keeps operational control of the docks, but your family gets I don't know. A percentage of legitimate shipping revenue? Something that makes this worth walking away from instead of dying over. I was making it up as I went, pulling from every business class I'd taken in my single year of community college. But something in the room shifted. The violence that had been gathering like a storm began to dissipate. Minetti looked at Leonardo. Your protection wears pearls and negotiates like a diplomat. Interesting choice. Leonardo's expression was unreadable, but his thumb moved against my wrist, a single stroke that felt almost like approval. 20%, Minetti said finally. Of legitimate shipping only. And this territory dispute ends here. 15, Leonardo countered. And you pull your men back from the West Side warehouses. 17. And we have a deal. They shook hands across the table, a gesture that apparently meant more than any contract in their world. The meeting ended with wine I didn't drink and pleasantries that felt surreal after nearly witnessing a murder. In the car ride back to the fortress, Leonardo said nothing. He just stared out the window, his jaw working like he was chewing on words too dangerous to speak. I'm sorry, I finally whispered. I shouldn't have. You just saved 4 lives, he interrupted, turning to look at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. Maybe more. Minetti's youngest son was in the next room with a rifle. If shooting started, it would have been a massacre. Oh. My hands were shaking. I hadn't known. I just reacted. Where did you learn to negotiate like that? He asked. I didn't. I just talked. Like they were people instead of. I trailed off, not wanting to say monsters. Instead of what we are, he finished for me, a bitter smile touching his lips. That's exactly why it worked. They're so used to violence they forgot about alternatives. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear in a gesture so gentle it made my breath catch. You're dangerous, Tamara Moore, he murmured. Just not in the way I expected. Something in his dark eyes shifted, and I realized with a start that I'd just become more than his possession. I'd become useful. And in Leonardo Monaldo's world, useful was far more permanent than protected. The car pulled through the iron gates, and I caught my reflection in the window. Still wearing his colors. Still in his cage. But for the first time, I wondered if maybe the bars were there to keep the world out instead of keeping me in. The call came at 2 in the morning, dragging me from a dream where I was back at the diner and none of this had happened yet. Rosa's voice through the intercom was tight, controlled, like she was holding something fragile between her teeth. Miss Moore. Mr. Monaldo needs you in his office. Now. I pulled a robe over my nightgown and moved through halls that had become familiar in the worst way, the kind of familiar that meant I'd stopped counting days and started counting survival. The fortress was different at night. Quieter. More honest about what it was. Leonardo's office door was open, light spilling into the corridor like a warning. I stepped inside and found him standing at the window, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in rapid Italian that sounded like shattered glass. His other hand was braced against the window frame, knuckles white with pressure. When he saw me, he ended the call without saying goodbye. Sit down, he said. The gentleness in his voice terrified me more than his anger ever could. What happened? I stayed standing, my body already preparing for impact, for the blow I couldn't see coming yet. He moved toward his desk and picked up a tablet, fingers tight around its edges like he wanted to crush it. For a long moment he just looked at me, and I saw something in his expression I'd never seen before. Guilt. Raw and undisguised. Your mother's house in Boston, he said quietly. There was a fire. The room tilted. My lungs forgot how to work. No. The word came out broken. No, you said you had people watching her, you said. I did. His jaw was so tight I could see the muscle jumping beneath the skin. I had a team on her. Round-the-clock surveillance. It wasn't enough. He turned the tablet toward me, and I wished he hadn't. Security footage showed my mother's small rental house, the one I'd been sending money to for 3 years to keep her in after the medical bills ate everything else. Flames crawled up the siding like living things. Smoke poured from windows I'd looked out of as a child. Is she? I couldn't finish the question. My throat closed around the words. She's alive. Leonardo set the tablet down and moved closer, hands rising like he wanted to touch me but knew better. My people got her out. She's in a private hospital now under guard. burns on her hands and smoke inhalation, but she'll recover. I sank into the chair I'd refused moments before, my legs simply giving up. Alive. The word rattled around in my skull, trying to find purchase. My mother was alive, but her home was gone, and it was my fault. Because I'd worn a red dress. Because I'd caught the attention of a monster. Because I'd become a weakness that could be exploited. Who did this? My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. Leonardo's silence was answer enough. Tell me, I demanded, looking up at him through eyes that burned with unshed tears. You brought me into this world. You made me a target. The least you can do is tell me who's trying to kill the only family I have left. He crouched in front of my chair, bringing himself to eye level, and the movement was so unexpected that I froze. Up close like this, I could see the exhaustion carved into his features, the shadow of beard that said he'd been awake for days, the fury barely leashed beneath that carefully controlled exterior. The Cordovas, he said. A family out of Providence. They've been trying to move into New York territory for 2 years. I've been pushing back. His hand moved to the arm of my chair, close enough that I could feel the heat of him. They sent the dress. They photographed you. And when I claimed you instead of ignoring their bait, they decided to test exactly how far I'd go to protect what's mine. I'm not yours, I whispered, but even I didn't believe it anymore. Tell that to the men who just burned down your mother's house to prove a point to me. His voice dropped lower, dangerous in a way that made my pulse spike. Tell that to the team I've had watching you sleep every night to make sure no one gets close enough to finish what they started. I stared at him, this man who'd hijacked my life and wrapped it in violence and expensive clothes and a protection I'd never asked for. What happens now? Something shifted in his expression, a door closing on whatever humanity had been visible moments before. He stood, that brief moment of vulnerability evaporating like it had never existed. Now I send a message back, he said, moving to his desk and opening a drawer. He pulled out a gun, checked it with the casual efficiency of someone who'd done it 10,000 times, and set it aside. And you stay here where my people can actually protect you, because clearly putting guards on your family isn't enough when I'm dealing with animals who light fires in the middle of the night. You can't just, I stood, anger finally cutting through the shock. You can't go kill people because they hurt my mother. I can, he said simply. I will. And I'll sleep fine afterward. This is exactly what they want. My voice rose, cracking on the edges. They want you reckless. They want you emotional. They're using me to make you into something you can't come back from. He stopped, gun in hand, and looked at me with eyes that had gone flat and cold. I passed that point the moment I put my coat on you at the Gala, Tesoro. There's no coming back. There's only forward, and forward means making sure everyone in this city knows that touching what belongs to me costs more than they're willing to pay. So, what am I supposed to do? I asked, hating how helpless I sounded. Just sit here and wait while you turn into exactly what they think you are? Yes. He slid the gun into a holster I hadn't noticed beneath his jacket. That's exactly what you do. You stay alive. You let me handle the things that need handling. And you stop trying to negotiate peace with people who sent a clear message written in fire and your mother's blood. He moved toward the door, but I caught his arm before he could leave. The contact shocked us both. I'd never initiated touch before, never willingly closed the distance between his violence and my fear. If you do this, I said quietly, if you go out there and massacre them the way I can see you want to, you're proving I was wrong about you. That you're not capable of being anything other than the monster they expect. His free hand came up to cover mine where it gripped his sleeve, and the touch was surprisingly gentle given the rage I could feel vibrating through him like a live wire. Maybe you were wrong, he said. Maybe I am exactly the monster, and the only thing that's changed is now I have something worth being monstrous for. He pulled away, leaving me standing in his office surrounded by maps of the city and tablets showing my mother's burning house and the weight of choices I'd never meant to force on anyone. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot. I sank back into the chair and finally let myself cry for my mother, for the girl I'd been before the gala, for the impossible situation of being protected by the same violence that had painted a target on everyone I loved. Somewhere in the fortress, engines started. Men moved with purpose. Leonardo Monaldo went to war, and I sat in his office wearing a borrowed robe in a borrowed life, trying to figure out how to save a man who thought salvation meant burning the world down to keep me warm. Rosa found me an hour later, still sitting in the dark, mascara I'd forgotten I was wearing tracking down my cheeks in salt-stained rivers. "Come, Bambina," she said softly, helping me to my feet. "There's nothing you can do now except wait." "I made it worse," I whispered. "If I hadn't tried to negotiate, if I hadn't made him think there was another way, you gave him hope," Rosa interrupted, steering me toward the door. "And hope in a man like Leonardo Monaldo is the most dangerous thing in the world. Because now he has something to lose." She walked me back to my room, but I knew I wouldn't sleep. I stood at the window watching the pre-dawn darkness, imagining the city below and the violence being written into it in my name. My phone, the one Leonardo had given me, monitored and controlled, sat on the nightstand. There was a new message. Not from him. From the hospital where my mother was being kept. "She's asking for you." I stared at those 4 words and felt the cage tighten another degree. Because going to her meant leaving the fortress. Leaving the fortress meant becoming vulnerable. Becoming vulnerable meant giving the Cordovas exactly what they wanted. But she was my mother. And she was asking for me. I looked at the hidden corner of my closet where the red dress still waited, ruined and precious and mine. Then I made a decision that would change everything. I was done being protected. Done being the reason Leonardo lost himself to the darkness he'd been fighting his whole life. If the Cordovas wanted to use me as bait, then I'd be bait. But this time, I'd choose the trap. If someone you loved became a monster to protect you, would you try to save them or let them burn the world? Tell me what you'd do. Drop your answer below. He returned near dawn, and I heard it from 3 floors away, the heavy front doors, the low murmur of men debriefing, the footsteps that climbed the stairs with the weight of someone carrying more than just a body up them. I'd been awake the entire time, sitting by my window watching the sky turn from black to bruised purple, wondering how many people had died tonight because of me. The knock on my door was soft. Almost hesitant. "Come in," I said, though my voice barely worked. Leonardo entered like he wasn't sure he had permission, and that alone told me something had shifted. He'd changed clothes since he left, the suit was different, no blood visible, but I could see it anyway in the hollow look behind his eyes, the way his hands hung at his sides like he didn't trust them anymore. "Your mother is stable," he said without preamble. "I spoke to her doctors an hour ago. She'll be released to a private facility in 3 days. Somewhere they'll never find her." "How many?" I asked. He didn't pretend to misunderstand. 6 Cordova soldiers. 2 of their lieutenants. And Marco Cordova himself. 9 men. 9 lives ended because I'd worn red silk to a gala and this man had decided I was worth keeping. Did it help? The question came out harder than I meant it to. Does my mother's house being ash feel balanced now that you've added bodies to the scales? Something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe, or the memory of it. "No," he said quietly. "It never does." He moved to leave, and I should have let him. Should have let him carry his violence back to whatever room he used to store it. But instead I stood, crossing the space between us before my better judgment could interfere. "Don't go," I said. He stopped, back still to me, shoulders rigid. "You should hate me right now." "I should," I agreed. "But I don't think I can afford to. Not when hating you means being alone in this." He turned slowly, and in the weak dawn light I could see the exhaustion carved into every line of his face. He looked older than he had hours ago. More human. More breakable. "I'm going to the balcony," he said after a moment. "To think. You should sleep. I'll come with you." His eyes searched mine, looking for something fear, maybe, or disgust at what he'd done in my name. Whatever he found made him nod once, sharp and resigned. The balcony attached to his private study was large enough for the ornate iron furniture that probably cost more than a car. The November air bit through my robe immediately, turning my breath to vapor. I wrapped my arms around myself, but it wasn't enough. Without a word, Leonardo shrugged out of his jacket and draped it over my shoulders. Not the coat from the gala, that one lived in my memory like a brand. This was lighter, still warm from his body, smelling of gunpowder beneath the cologne. I pulled it tighter and sat in one of the iron chairs. He remained standing at the railing, looking out over his kingdom of stone and steel and secrets. "My mother died when I was 8, he said suddenly, voice low enough that I almost missed it. Cancer. The kind that eats you slowly while everyone watches and pretends there's still hope." I stayed quiet, sensing that this was a door he didn't open often, and any sound might slam it shut again. My father was traditional. Old world. He believed weakness was contagious. Leonardo's hands gripped the railing, knuckles going white. When she got sick, he pulled away. Said she'd brought shame to the family by being fragile. He took a mistress before my mother was even cold. The bitterness in his voice was old, worn smooth by years of carrying it. I was with her when she died, he continued, holding her hand in a hospital room while my father conducted business downstairs. Her last words were, "Don't let them make you hard." And I promised her I wouldn't. His laugh was sharp, broken. I was 8 and stupid, and I actually thought I could keep that promise. He turned from the railing, and in the gray light I could see the truth of him, not the monster, not the Mafia Don, just a man who'd been a boy once and had that beaten out of him by circumstance and blood. My father started training me the next day, Leonardo said. Took me to my first execution when I was 10. Made me watch while he put a bullet in a man who'd stolen from us. He said, "This is what happens to weakness. This is what happens when you love something more than power." And then he made me pull the trigger on the second one. My chest tightened, imagining a child holding a gun, being taught that love was a liability. I learned fast, he continued, moving closer until he stood in front of my chair, looking down at me with eyes that held decades of careful distance. I learned that caring about anything made you vulnerable. That the moment you showed attachment, your enemies would use it to cut you open. So I didn't attach. I didn't keep women around long enough to learn their last names. I didn't make friends. I built an empire on the principle that nothing mattered except power and survival. And then I wore red to a gala, I whispered. And then you wore red to a gala, he echoed, crouching down so we were eye level, the same way he had the night everything started. And I saw them looking at you like you were prey, and something in me that was supposed to be dead woke up screaming. His hand reached out, hesitating an inch from my face like he was asking permission. I leaned into the touch, and his palm cupped my cheek with a gentleness that seemed impossible from hands that had killed 9 men tonight. "I'm not good at this," he said roughly. "At wanting something. At caring if something survives. My whole life I've been taught that possession is the same as protection, that controlling something is how you keep it safe." "That's not love," I said softly. "That's fear." "I know." His thumb traced my cheekbone, and I felt that touch everywhere, like my whole body had been waiting for permission to feel something other than terror. "But it's all I know how to give." "Then learn something new," I challenged, holding his gaze even though my heart was trying to break free of my ribs. "Learn what it means to trust instead of control." "And if I can't?" The vulnerability in his voice undid something in me. "If all I know how to do is cage the things I'm afraid to lose?" I reached up and covered his hand with mine, holding it against my face. "Then I'll teach you. The same way I'm learning how to survive in your world. We'll both be students of something we don't understand." He moved closer, his other hand finding the back of my neck, fingers threading into my hair. "You should run from me, Tamara. You should take your mother and disappear into a life where red dresses are just dresses and men like me are just nightmares you wake up from." Maybe I agreed. But nightmares are easier to face when you stop running from them. He kissed me then, and it wasn't gentle or tentative or asking for permission. It was desperate and claiming and tasted like regret and hope tangled together. His hands pulled me up from the chair, my body fitting against his like we'd been designed for this, and his jacket fell from my shoulders to pool on the ground. The cold bit harder without it, but he was warm, solid, real in a way that nothing else had been since the gala. I kissed him back with everything I'd been holding in, the fear, the anger, the strange twisted feeling that maybe being his prisoner was the freest I'd ever been. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. "This doesn't fix anything," he said roughly. "I'm still the man who killed 9 people tonight. You're still the woman whose life I destroyed by being selfish enough to claim you." "I know," I whispered. but maybe broken things can hold each other up while they figure out how to heal. He pulled me closer, wrapping both arms around me, and we stood there on his balcony as the sun finally broke over the city, turning the skyline gold. His heart beat against my ear, steady and strong, and I realized with a start that I'd stopped counting the days since the gala. I was counting something else now. The moments when Leonardo Monaldo looked at me like I was worth more than the empire he'd built. The seconds when his carefully constructed walls showed cracks. The possibility that a man taught to equate love with weakness might learn a different language if someone was patient enough to teach him. "Come inside," he said finally, voice rough. "Before you freeze." He picked up his jacket and draped it over me again, and this time when his hand found the small of my back to guide me, it felt less like possession and more like partnership. We didn't speak as we walked through the fortress, past guards who pretended not to notice, past cameras that recorded everything and understood nothing. When we reached my door, he stopped. "I can't promise I'll be good at this," he said. "At being what you need instead of just what I think will keep you safe." "Then promise me something else," I said. "Promise you'll try." His jaw worked, that careful control warring with something raw. "I promise." I went inside, closed the door, and leaned against it, his jacket still warm around my shoulders. In the mirror across the room, I saw myself, hair mussed, lips swollen from kissing a killer, eyes bright with something that looked dangerously close to hope. The red dress was still hidden in my closet. But I was starting to think maybe I didn't need it anymore. Maybe I was learning to be dangerous all on my own. The photograph arrived in a manila envelope slipped under my door 3 days after the balcony. No note. No explanation. Just a single image that made my blood run cold. It showed a man who looked like Leonardo if you stripped away 10 years and added cruelty where Leonardo had control. Same dark eyes, same sharp jaw, but twisted into an expression that suggested he enjoyed the violence where Leonardo merely accepted it as necessary. He was standing outside my old apartment building, holding a black box tied with red ribbon. The box the dress had arrived in. I found Rosa in the kitchen, kneading dough with the aggressive efficiency of someone working out frustrations on flour and yeast. She took one look at my face and wiped her hands clean. "What happened?" I slid the photograph across the marble counter. Her expression shifted from concern to something harder, more dangerous. For the first time since I'd arrived, I saw the woman who'd survived decades in Leonardo Monaldo's world, and she wasn't soft. "Where did you get this?" she asked quietly. "Under my door." "Rosa, who is he?" She was quiet for a long moment, eyes fixed on the photograph like it might bite. "That's Dante," she finally said. "Leonardo's half-brother." The kitchen tilted slightly. "Leonardo has a brother?" "Had," Rosa corrected, then seemed to reconsider. "Has. Though Leonardo buried him years ago in every way that matters except the literal one." I pulled out a chair before my legs could give up. "Tell me." Rosa poured 2 glasses of wine even though it wasn't yet noon and slid one across to me. "Dante is the son Leonardo's father had with his mistress. The one he took up while Leonardo's mother was dying. The old man legitimized him after she passed, brought him into the family, gave him the Monaldo name." She took a long drink. "Leonardo was 12. Dante was 8. And from that moment, the old man pitted them against each other like dogs fighting for scraps." "Why would he do that?" "Because he believed competition made men strong. That if his sons had to claw their way to the top over each other's backs, whoever won would be worthy of the empire." Rosa's smile was bitter. "He didn't count on Leonardo winning by refusing to play the game." I stared at the photograph, at the man who looked like a corrupted version of the one I'd kissed 3 nights ago. "What happened?" "Leonardo chose differently," Rosa said. "When their father died and the family business passed to him, he offered Dante a partnership. Equal share, equal say. But Dante didn't want partnership. He wanted everything. Wanted Leonardo destroyed, humiliated, buried the way he felt he'd been buried by being the bastard son." She shook her head. 3 years ago, Dante tried to stage a coup. Turned half the soldiers against Leonardo, made alliances with rival families, planned to take over in a single bloody night. But Leonardo found out, I guessed. "Leonardo always finds out," Rosa said. He crushed the rebellion in 6 hours. Gave every man who'd betrayed him a choice, exile or execution. Most chose exile. She paused, finger tracing the rim of her glass. Dante chose neither. He went underground. Swore he'd come back and take everything Leonardo loved. The pieces clicked together with horrible clarity. But Leonardo didn't love anything. So Dante had to create something for him to love. Rosa's eyes met mine, sharp with understanding. He researched for months. Found you working double shifts, sending money to your sick mother, living small and invisible. The perfect virgin sacrifice. Her voice dropped. He sent the dress knowing Leonardo would see it as a territorial challenge. Knowing Leonardo would either ignore you, proving weakness, or claim you, giving Dante the weapon he needed. I thought about the gala, the way every eye had tracked me in that red silk, the predatory attention that had made my skin crawl. He wanted Leonardo to care about me so he could use me to hurt him. Yes, Rosa confirmed. And it worked. Leonardo put his coat on you in front of the entire underworld. Declared you his. Made you matter. She reached across and squeezed my hand. Made you the target. My mother's house burning. The Cordovas attacking. The 9 men Leonardo had killed. None of it was random. All of it orchestrated by a brother who'd learned that the best way to destroy Leonardo Monaldo was to give him something to lose, and then take it away slowly, publicly, painfully. Does Leonardo know? I asked. That it was Dante? Not yet, a voice said from the doorway. We both spun. Leonardo stood there in shirt sleeves and shoulder holster, looking like he'd been there long enough to hear everything. The expression on his face was carefully blank, which I'd learned meant he was feeling too much to safely show it. How long have you been standing there? Rosa demanded. Long enough. He moved into the kitchen, picked up the photograph, and stared at his brother's face with something that might have been grief if grief could be weaponized. Where did this come from? I explained about the envelope, and watched his jaw tighten with each word. He's here, Leonardo said quietly. In the city. Close enough to get messages past my security. His eyes lifted to mine. Close enough to finish what he started. The Cordovas, I said, understanding dawning. They weren't acting independently. Dante's been using them. Using everyone, Leonardo corrected. He set the photograph down and braced both hands on the counter, head bowed like he was praying or preparing for war. The dress. The gala. Your mother. All of it designed to make me. He trailed off. Human, I finished softly. He wanted to prove you could still be hurt. Leonardo's laugh was sharp, humorless. Well, he succeeded. He straightened, and I watched him rebuild the walls in real time, brick by brick, shutting down everything we'd built on that balcony. This ends now. I'm moving you to a secondary location. Somewhere even Dante can't trace. No, I said. He stared at me like I'd spoken a language he didn't understand. Excuse me? I said no. I stood, meeting his gaze across the kitchen. You're doing exactly what he wants. He sent the dress to make you possessive. He attacked my mother to make you vengeful. And now he's revealed himself to make you scared. Every move you make to protect me is another string he pulls. So, what do you suggest? The ice in his voice could have frozen blood. I let him kill you to prove I don't care? Let him succeed where the Cordovas failed. No, I said again, forcing my voice to stay steady. You let me help you stop him. Absolutely not. Leonardo, no. The word cracked through the kitchen like a gunshot. You don't understand what he is, what he's capable of. Dante doesn't just kill people, Tamara. He destroys them. He finds what they love most, and he burns it to ash while they watch, and then he makes them wish they'd died first. Then teach me, I said, moving closer even as every instinct screamed to back away from the fury rolling off him. Teach me how to survive him. How to be something other than a weakness he can exploit. You can't learn this, Leonardo said, but his voice had shifted from anger to something more desperate. You're not built for this world. Neither were you once, I countered. You were 8 years old watching your mother die. You were 10 years old being forced to pull a trigger. Someone made you into what you are. I reached for his hand, felt him flinch but not pull away. Let me choose it instead of having it forced on me. Rosa cleared her throat from where she'd been watching like this was a play she'd seen before but never with this ending. The girl has a point. Rosa, no, Leonardo. Listen to her. Rosa stood, moving to his other side like we were flanking him. Dante sent her the dress because he thought she was weak. Thought you'd break yourself trying to keep something fragile intact. But she's still here. Still standing. Still choosing to stay even knowing what it costs. She poked his chest. Maybe your brother miscalculated. Leonardo's eyes moved between us, and I could see him calculating, strategizing, trying to find the angle that kept me safe while still allowing him to do what needed doing. But there was no angle. There was only trust or control, and he'd promised me on the balcony that he'd try to learn the difference. If I let you help, he said slowly, you do exactly what I say. No improvising. No heroics. No trying to negotiate peace with a man who'd sell it back to me in pieces. Agreed, I said. And if at any point I say you're out, you're out. No arguments. Okay. He pulled his hand from mine and ran it through his hair, making it stand on end, destroying the careful styling. He looked younger this way, more like the boy who'd promised his dying mother he wouldn't let them make him hard. Dante will expect me to hide you, he said, thinking out loud now. To lock you away somewhere he can't reach. Which means he'll be watching every safe house, every secondary location, every place I might stash something valuable. So don't hide me, I said. Do the opposite. His eyes snapped to mine, and I saw the exact moment he understood. You want to be bait. I want to control the trap instead of being caught in it, I corrected. He sent me to you in red. Let's send him a message in the same color. Rosa smiled, and it wasn't kind. I like her, Leonardo. She's learning. She's going to get herself killed, he muttered, but he was already pulling out his phone, already making the calls that would set everything in motion. We do this my way. Controlled environment. Every exit covered. Every variable accounted for. Agreed, I said again. He ended the call and looked at me with eyes that held too many emotions to name. If this goes wrong, it won't, I interrupted. If it does, he continued, voice dropping lower, if Dante gets anywhere near you, I need you to promise me something. I waited. Promise me you'll run, he said. Not fight. Not try to reason with him. Just run and let my people handle it. I thought about the red dress in my closet, about the girl who'd worn it thinking she was going to a charity gala, about how much had changed in the weeks since. I promise I'll survive, I said carefully. However that needs to happen. It wasn't the promise he wanted, but it was the only one I could give. He stared at me for a long moment, then pulled me against his chest, arms wrapping around me like he could shield me from his own blood, his own history, his own brother. He's going to wish he'd killed you quick, Leonardo murmured against my hair. By the time I'm done, Dante will beg me to remember we're family. I held him tighter and tried not to think about what it meant that I wasn't afraid of his vengeance anymore. I was counting on it. The dress was still ruined, torn at the hem, stained with grass and blood and the memory of my attempted escape. But Rosa worked miracles with needle and thread, transforming the damage into something intentional. Strategic cuts became deliberate design. The stains darkened into a pattern that looked almost like flames. What had been destroyed became dangerous. You look like war, Rosa said, standing back to assess her work. I turned to the mirror and barely recognized myself. The innocent girl who'd worn this dress to a gala had died somewhere between the limousine and the balcony kiss. The woman staring back had sharper eyes, a harder set to her jaw, and a comfort with her own reflection that felt new and terrifying and right. Good, I said. Leonardo's gala, because of course he had his own, was being held at the estate, in the ballroom I'd only glimpsed in passing. He'd invited every family in the tri-state area, every rival and ally and fence-sitter who needed to see that the Monaldo empire was stable, strong, and not vulnerable to a bastard brother's schemes. And he'd invited Dante. Not explicitly. Not with an engraved card. But with the kind of open invitation that came from calculated weaknesses in security, planted rumors about my location, and the very public announcement that Leonardo Monaldo's woman would be appearing at his side for the first time since the coat incident. Bait, wrapped in red silk and defiance. Rosa helped me with my hair, piling it high with strategic pieces falling to frame my face. No jewelry except for the simple gold bracelet Leonardo had given me that morning, thin as a promise, strong as a shackle, with a tracking device embedded in the clasp. If anything happens, he'd said while fastening it, this tells me where you are. Down to the inch. Nothing's going to happen, I'd replied. His look had said he knew I was lying, but he'd kissed my wrist anyway, right over the pulse point the bracelet now covered. The knock on my door came at 8. I opened it to find Leonardo in full formal wear, looking like every forbidden fantasy and nightmare combined. Black suit tailored so precisely it might have been painted on. Hair styled back to show the sharp angles of his face. And eyes that went molten when they landed on me in the red dress. Christo, he breathed. You're not making this easy. Making what easy? Letting you out of this room. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him, and suddenly the space felt too small for all the tension crackling between us. Every man down there is going to look at you the same way they did at the gala. Like you're something to be taken. Let them look, I said, smoothing my hands down the silk. This time I know the difference between predators and protectors. His hand caught my waist, pulling me close enough that I could feel his heartbeat through all the expensive layers. And which am I? Both, I answered honestly. But you're mine. That makes all the difference. Something shifted in his expression, possession giving way to something that looked almost like awe. You terrify me, he said quietly. You know that? Good. Now we're even. He kissed me then, careful not to smudge Rosa's carefully applied lipstick, and I tasted desperation beneath the control. This was the moment everything could go wrong. The night Dante would make his move, try to finish what he'd started, prove that Leonardo's humanity was a weakness that could be exploited. We were betting everything that he was wrong. The ballroom had been transformed into something that belonged in a different century. Chandeliers dripped crystal light across marble floors polished to mirrors. Tables laden with food that was art before it was sustenance. And everywhere, people dressed in their finest armor, smiling with their mouths while their eyes calculated advantage and weakness. The music stuttered when we entered, just like it had at the first gala. But this time I didn't flinch. I walked beside Leonardo with my head high, red dress moving like liquid fire, and met every stare with the kind of calm that came from knowing exactly what kind of danger you were walking into. Leonardo's hand at the small of my back was steady, possessive, and deliberately visible to every camera and eye in the room. They're all wondering who you are, he murmured as we descended the grand staircase. What you mean to me? And what do I mean to you? I asked, keeping my smile pleasant even as my heart tried to hammer through my ribs. His answer came at the bottom of the stairs, where he turned me to face him in front of 300 witnesses and slid his hand to cut my face with a gentleness that contradicted every rumor ever whispered about Leonardo Monaldo. Everything, he said, loud enough for the closest observers to hear. You mean everything? It was a declaration of war wrapped in a confession, and I watched it ripple through the crowd like a stone thrown into still water. We moved through the room like royalty, Leonardo introducing me to men whose names I recognized from news reports and police briefings. They kissed my hand with practiced charm while their eyes assessed exactly how much damage my death would do to the man beside me. I smiled and played the part of the innocent girlfriend, while cataloging every exit and every face that looked a little too much like Leonardo's. Dante didn't show himself immediately. He was too smart for that, too well trained in the art of dramatic timing. So we waited, dancing to orchestral music that felt like a countdown, accepting congratulations from people who didn't know they were attending a potential massacre. The attack came at midnight, precise as a fairy tale. The lights went out first, not all of them, just enough to create pockets of shadow in a room designed for visibility. Leonardo's arm tightened around my waist, pulling me against him as guards materialized from positions I hadn't noticed them taking. Stay close, he commanded, but I'd already known that would be his first instinct. The gunshot came from the balcony overlooking the ballroom, and I felt Leonardo move before the sound fully registered, his body becoming a shield between me and the direction of fire. But the bullet wasn't aimed at me. It shattered the chandelier directly above where we'd been standing seconds before, and the crystal rained down like glittering knives. Screams erupted. People ran. And in the chaos, I saw him. Dante stood in the balcony doorway, backlit like an avenging angel, and the resemblance to Leonardo was strong enough to hurt. He wasn't pointing the gun anymore. That had been for show, for distraction. He was just watching, waiting to see what his brother would do now that the game had begun in earnest. "Hello, Fratello," Dante called out, voice carrying over the pandemonium. "I see you got my gift. She wears it well." Leonardo's hand found mine, squeezing once, reassurance or goodbye, I couldn't tell which. "Dante, I was wondering when you'd show yourself. And miss seeing you play house with the Virgin?" Dante's laugh was cruel, sharp. I had to see it in person. The great Leonardo Monaldo, brought to his knees by a girl in a dress I picked out. His gaze slid to me, and I felt the weight of it like something physical. "Tell me, Piccola, do you know what that color means? What it makes you in our world?" "It means Monaldo," I said, surprised my voice didn't shake. "It means I'm under his protection." "It means you're marked for death," Dante corrected. "It means every enemy he has will come for you, use you, break you to get to him." Is that really the life you want? Being the weapon someone uses against the man you think you love? "I don't think," I said clearly. "I know. And I'm not a weapon. I'm a choice." Something flickered in Dante's expression, surprise, maybe, that I'd spoken at all. He'd expected me to cower, to hide behind Leonardo, to prove his point about weakness. "A choice," Dante repeated, tasting the word. How modern. "Leonardo, your pet has a voice." "She's not my pet," Leonardo said, and there was death in his voice, cold and certain. "She's my equal." "And you miscalculated, Fratellino. You thought giving me something to love would make me weak, but all you did was give me a reason to make sure you never threaten anyone I care about ever again." Movement in the shadows, Leonardo's soldiers closing in from positions Dante hadn't accounted for. He saw it too, the trap snapping shut, but he didn't run. He smiled. "You know what Father used to say?" Dante asked conversationally, even as guns were aimed at his head from 6 different angles. "That love was a disease that killed more men than bullets ever could." He was right. His eyes landed on me again. "I don't need to kill her, Leonardo. I just need you to know that I could. That every day she breathes is a day you spend afraid of what I might do. That's the real cage, not the one you built around her, but the one she built around you." "Then let's end the cage," Leonardo said. He moved so fast I almost missed it, pulling the gun from his holster and firing in a single fluid motion. But he didn't aim for Dante. He aimed for the floor beside him, splintering marble and making his brother flinch. "On your knees," Leonardo commanded. "Hands behind your head. You wanted to see me choose between family and empire? Watch me choose both." For a moment I thought Dante might refuse, might force Leonardo to kill him and carry that blood forever. But then he saw what I'd seen from the beginning, that Leonardo wasn't bluffing, wasn't posturing. He'd already made peace with whatever came next. Dante dropped to his knees. Guards swarmed the balcony. Within seconds Dante was in restraints, being hauled down the stairs to the ballroom floor, past the gala guests who'd gone silent as ghosts. He was brought before Leonardo like an offering, and I watched my monster become a king dispensing justice. "You're right," Leonardo said to his brother. "Love is dangerous. It makes you vulnerable. It gives people weapons they can use against you." He looked at me then, and I saw everything we'd built in his eyes. "But it also makes you human. And I'd rather be a human who loves and bleeds than a monster who feels nothing." He turned back to Dante. "You're exiled. Permanent. If you ever set foot in my territory again, if you ever speak her name, if you even think about undoing what I've built, I won't kill you quick. I'll make you wish for the mercy I'm showing you now." "That's it." Dante spat. "Exile? You're proving my point, Fratello. You've gone soft." "No," Leonardo said quietly. "I've just learned the difference between strength and cruelty. Take him out of my sight." They dragged Dante away, still laughing, still certain he'd won something. But I knew better. Leonardo had beaten him not by becoming the monster Dante expected, but by refusing to. The gala resumed slowly, guests murmuring about what they'd witnessed, already spinning it into legend. Leonardo pulled me onto the dance floor as the orchestra started again, and we moved together like we'd done this 1,000 times. "Thank you," he said against my hair. "For what?" "For teaching me that cages work both ways," he said. That sometimes the thing you think is protecting you is actually just keeping you small. I looked up at him, this man who'd thrown his coat over me and changed everything. So what happens now? His smile was slow, genuine, and completely mine. Now we burn the dress. The real one this time, not the copy Rosa made. We burn it, and everything it represented, the trap, the bait, the girl who didn't know what she was worth. He pulled me closer. And then we figure out who we are when we're not fighting to survive. The red dress moved around me like fire as we danced, and I realized he was right. It had served its purpose. It had brought me here, to this moment, to this man, to this version of myself that could stand beside a monster and help him remember his humanity. But I didn't need it anymore. I had become the thing the dress was trying to make me. Dangerous. Desired. Defiant. His. When does protecting someone become controlling them, and how do you know when you've crossed that line? Subscribe if you're ready to see how this ends. The invitation was printed on cream-colored cardstock with text embossed in deep crimson. It read simply, "The Monaldos request the pleasure of your company." No date needed to be specified. Everyone who mattered knew that when Leonardo and Tamara Monaldo sent an invitation, you cleared your calendar and you came. I held one of the samples up to the light streaming through the study windows, watching the way the red ink caught and gleamed. A year ago, I would have been terrified by the weight these cards carried, by the power they represented. Now I just appreciated the craftsmanship. "You're smiling," Leonardo said from the doorway, and I heard the warmth in his voice that still surprised me sometimes, the softness he'd learned to show when it was just us. "I'm remembering," I corrected, setting the invitation aside and turning to face my husband. He'd stopped wearing suits in the house months ago, trading them for tailored shirts with the sleeves rolled up, exposing the forearms I'd traced 1,000 times. More comfortable. More human. The man who'd thrown his coat over me at a gala had slowly learned to take off his armor at home, and I counted that among my greatest victories. "Remembering what?" he asked, crossing to where I stood and pulling me against him with the casual possessiveness that had evolved from control into comfort. "The last gala we attended together. The red dress." How terrified I was. I looked up at him, at the face that had become as familiar as my own. How little I understood about what I was walking into. His hand came up to cut my jaw, thumb brushing my cheekbone in the gesture that had become his signature way of grounding himself. "And now? Now I'm the one sending the invitations," I said. "Now I'm the one deciding who gets to enter our world." Our world. It had taken months for that phrase to feel natural, for me to stop thinking of the Monaldo Empire as something I was visiting and start treating it as something I was building. The transition hadn't been smooth. I'd fought Leonardo on everything from business strategy to whether we needed armed guards at the grocery store, but somewhere along the way, we'd figured out how to be partners instead of captor and captive. "Rosa wants to know what you're wearing tonight," Leonardo said, though his eyes suggested he had opinions on the matter. "I thought I'd wear red," I said casually, watching his reaction. His grip tightened fractionally. Even now, a year later, that color did something to him. Reminded him of the night everything changed, of the moment he'd looked across a ballroom and seen something he couldn't ignore. "The red dress?" he asked carefully. "A red dress," I corrected. "New one. Though I kept some elements of the original." I pulled back enough to meet his eyes fully. "Is that going to be a problem?" "Only if you're trying to give me a heart attack in front of 300 guests," he said, but he was smiling. "You know what red does to me." "I do," I agreed. "That's why I'm wearing it." He kissed me then, deep and claiming and still touched with that edge of desperation that said he hadn't quite gotten over the fear of losing me. I kissed him back with the confidence of someone who knew exactly how much power she held and wasn't afraid to use it. When we broke apart, both breathing harder, he rested his forehead against mine. "A year ago, I would have locked you in this room rather than let you wear red in public again." "A year ago, I would have tried to escape out the window," I countered. "You did try to escape out the window. And you let me learn why I shouldn't," I said. "We've both come a long way." His hand slid down to catch mine, to the ring he'd placed there 6 months ago in a private ceremony that had been more binding than any public spectacle. Simple gold band, no ostentatious diamond, just a promise engraved on the inside. "You made me human." I'd had his made to match, with an inscription of my own: "You made me dangerous." We wore them like the vows they were, reminders that we'd chosen this, chosen each other, chosen to build something new from the broken pieces of who we'd been before. The gala began at 8, and I took my time getting ready. The new dress was a masterpiece, red silk like the original, but cut differently. Higher neckline, showing less skin but somehow more provocative for what it suggested rather than revealed. The back plunged low enough to make a statement. The fabric moved like water, like blood, like power distilled into clothing. Rosa whistled when she saw me. "That man is going to lose his mind." "That's the idea," I said, turning to check the back in the mirror. "You've changed," Rosa observed, fastening a diamond bracelet around my wrist, different from the one with the tracker, this one purely decorative. "The girl who arrived here would never have weaponized a dress." "The girl who arrived here didn't know dresses could be weapons," I replied. "She does now." Leonardo was waiting at the bottom of the grand staircase, the same stairs we'd descended a year ago during Dante's attack. He'd chosen to hold this gala at the estate deliberately, reclaiming the space, overriding old memories with new ones. When he saw me, his expression shifted through a dozen emotions too fast to name before settling on something that looked like reverence wrapped in hunger. "Cristo Santo," he breathed as I descended. "You're trying to kill me." "Just reminding you why you married me," I said, taking his offered arm. As if I could forget, he murmured, and I felt his hand tremble slightly where it rested over mine. The ballroom had been transformed again, but this time I'd overseen every detail. Flowers in deep crimson and pure white. Lighting that made the whole space glow warm and intimate despite its size. Tables arranged not for hierarchy but for conversation, for connection, for the kind of business that happened when people relaxed their guard. This wasn't Leonardo's gala. It wasn't mine either. It was ours, a statement to everyone watching that the Monaldo empire had evolved into something new, something that balanced his calculated ruthlessness with my instinct for finding solutions that didn't require bloodshed. The guests arrived like a who's who of organized crime and legitimate business, so entangled you couldn't separate them. Families that had been rivals were seated beside each other, forced into proximity that would either spark new alliances or old wars. I'd gambled on the former, and so far the bet was paying off. Victor Rinaldi arrived early, bringing his wife, the first time he'd brought family to a Monaldo event. He shook Leonardo's hand, then took mine and bowed over it with genuine respect. "Mrs. Monaldo," he said, "thank you for the invitation. And for the proof that negotiations work better than bullets." "Most of the time," I said with a smile. "We keep the bullets for special occasions." He laughed, and I saw Leonardo's lips quirk. I'd learned to speak their language, to make threats sound like jokes and jokes sound like threats, to navigate the space between charm and danger that this world required. We moved through the crowd together, Leonardo's hand at my back in the gesture that had become our signature. But the meaning had shifted. It wasn't possession anymore. It was partnership. A silent communication that said, "We're in this together." Halfway through the evening, during a lull in the music, Leonardo pulled me onto the dance floor. The crowd parted automatically, creating space for us the way seas parted for storms. "You know they're all staring," he murmured as we began to move. "Let them," I said. "We're worth staring at." He smiled, the real one that was mine alone. "A year ago you were terrified of attention." "A year ago I didn't understand the difference between being seen and being vulnerable," I replied. "Now I know that being seen on my own terms is power." "And the dress?" he asked, hand sliding lower on my back, to the exposed skin the plunging cut revealed. "Is this you on your own terms?" "This is me reminding you, and everyone else in this room, that I chose to wear red," I said. "That I choose to stand beside you. That I'm not here because you claimed me, but because I claimed you right back." His eyes darkened with something that made my pulse spike. "You're dangerous, Mrs. Monaldo." "I learned from the best, Mr. Monaldo," I countered. The music swelled, and we moved together like we'd been choreographed, like the year of learning each other's rhythms had created something that didn't need words or planning. Around us, the gala continued, business being conducted in whispers, alliances being forged over champagne, the machinery of Leonardo's empire humming along smoothly. But in our bubble on the dance floor, it was just us. The monster who'd learned to be human and the innocent who'd learned to be dangerous, building something that shouldn't work but somehow did. I love you, Leonardo said quietly, the words still new enough that they felt precious. He didn't say them often, but when he did, they carried the weight of someone who'd never expected to mean them. I know, I said. That's why I married you. Not for the empire? The power? The protection? Those are nice benefits, I admitted. But I married you because you threw your coat over me and declared that no one else could see what was yours. And then you spent a year learning that owning something and loving something are completely different. His hand tightened on mine. And you? Why did you really stay? I thought about the girl who'd worn a red dress to a gala, who'd been terrified and confused and certain she was going to die. I thought about the woman who'd hidden that same dress in her closet like contraband, refusing to let Leonardo erase who she was. I thought about all the moments between then and now, the fear, the anger, the slow understanding that sometimes the cage and the sanctuary were the same thing, depending on how you looked at them. I stayed because you made me an offer no one else ever had, I said finally. You offered me a choice. To leave or to stay. To be a victim or a queen. To let fear control me or to become something fear couldn't touch. I smiled up at him. And I chose to be dangerous with you rather than safe without you. The music ended. The crowd applauded. And Leonardo Monaldo, feared by most, respected by all, loved by one, pulled me close and kissed me in front of everyone who mattered, staking his claim not through possession but through devotion. When we broke apart, I saw it in the faces watching us. Understanding. Recognition. The knowledge that something fundamental had shifted in the Monaldo empire, that the woman in the red dress wasn't a weakness to be exploited, but a force to be reckoned with. Later, after the guests had gone and the staff had cleaned up, Leonardo and I stood on his balcony, our balcony now, watching the sun rise over the city we'd made our kingdom. Do you ever regret it? He asked quietly. Wearing that dress? Starting all of this? I thought about my mother, safe now in a house we'd bought her, healthy and asking when we were going to give her grandchildren. I thought about my apartment that had burned, the life I'd lost, the innocence I could never reclaim. I thought about the power I held now, the choices I could make, the person I'd become. No, I said honestly. I regret that I didn't know what I was choosing. But I don't regret the choice itself. His arm came around my shoulders, pulling me against him. Good. Because I'm not letting you go. I know, I said. That's why I wore your ring. We stood there as the city woke below us, two people who'd found each other in violence and learned to build something gentle between the bloodshed. The red dress from tonight hung in my closet beside a dozen others, none of them hidden anymore, all of them declarations of who I'd chosen to become. A virgin lady had worn red to a gala once, and a monster had claimed her. But the woman who'd emerged from that claiming was neither virgin nor victim. She was a queen. And this was her reign. Thank you for listening until the very end. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the story. There's another story like the one you just enjoyed on your left screen.